Who is this man? And why did he kill the one in his arms? Why is he so full of regret after the act? The work you are looking at is one of the most chilling paintings in art history, because in this painting, Ivan the Terrible is killing his son. The person lying in Ivan's arms is his son. Even though Ivan places his hand to stop the flow of blood, it is flowing so heavily that it's impossible to stop. Moreover, it isn't just blood flowing from his son's face. There is also a tear. He has surrendered himself into the arms of his father's killer in such a way that it is as if he has long accepted his death. That listlessness in his body makes one feel that the struggle is no longer of any use. As the blood flows, death draws closer. Look at the contrast in the expressions of the father and son. The son has long accepted the truth. He knows that after this much blood loss, it is impossible to stay alive. The father, however, cannot accept it. The son's acceptance of his own death is answered only by a single tear. We understand the father's struggle to accept it from the panic in his eyes, compared to the father's animalistic and strained posture. The son has an attitude we might call elegant. The father holds his son's body tightly as if to say, "Don't die." But the son prefers only a soft touch toward his father, as if he is drawing support from him with this hand. This naive gesture gives the impression that even in this moment of death, he forgives his killer. Ultimately, Ivan cannot escape the reality of his action, and those shocked eyes remind him, "I killed my son." Additionally, there is a contrast in their clothing. Notice the son's light-toned garment, almost resembling an angel, compared to Ivan's black clothing, which evokes the Grim Reaper. Although the work initially directs us to the father, to Ivan's eyes, let's look at it from the son's perspective. In his eyes, there is neither anger nor hatred. At most, we could call it disappointment. He is surprised because the person ending his life is his own father. When we follow the blood flowing from the son's body, it leads us to the murder weapon, Ivan's staff. He struck his son's temple with his staff, and looking at the intensity of the blood, he delivered such a hard blow that it will lead his son to a slow but painful death. The details in the work are also perfect. Look at the son's boots. The details of the rug are the same. When we look at the fold in the rug and the overturned items in the background, it is clear that a struggle took place. Ivan did not attack in secret. He struck his son while the son was looking into his eyes. The painter of the work is Ilya Repin, and Repin had drawn different versions of this work before. For example, in the draft he drew in 1882, the son appears already dead. In the sketch he drew the same year, the son is in a state of shock, just like his father. In 83, he advanced these drawings into a sketch. There are some differences between this version and our main work. The blood on the son is heavily smeared on his clothes. Also, Ivan's staff is in his hand this time, not on the side, and that state of panic in Ivan is not very evident in this work. The painter made all these drawings before 1885, the year of our main work, but in 1909. Even though approximately 24 years had passed, he made a second version of this painting. This painting is a bit nauseating. The saturation and contrast in the colors tire the eyes. Here, Ivan is wailing because he has accepted the reality of the situation, and he is not alone at the scene. There is a witness in the back, but our main work is more powerful than all of them in many aspects. For example, compared to the son being dead or in shock, his surrendered. A resigned state feels more striking as it creates a contrast with his father, or rather than the state where Ivan accepts that he killed his son and cries. The exact moment he realizes the truth and is devastated is emotionally much more intense. Also, the staff being on the side rather than in his hand was a good choice. It gives the impression that after striking, he threw his staff aside and immediately ran to his son's side. He wants to distance himself from the staff in this horrific event. It is also interesting that this painting, which is extremely violent, was attacked twice. The first attack occurred in 1913 by a mentally ill person. This mentally ill person, who cut the work in 3 places with his knife, shouted these words, "Enough death, enough blood." The second attack took place recently, in 2018. In this second attack, about 100 years after the first, the attacker severely damaged the work in 3 places with a metal pole. His motivation for the attack was that this work contained historically incorrect information. Because according to this attacker, Ivan did not kill his son. Now it is necessary to move on to the historical part of the work. Someone named Ivan the Terrible truly existed. He was the first Tsar of Russia and an emperor very important to Russian history. And Ivan did have a son who died at an early age. But our main question is this: did Ivan really kill his son? The first thing that catches our attention regarding Ivan IV, or by his nickname Ivan the Terrible, is of course his nickname. Someone referred to as Ivan the Terrible creates an image in our eyes of someone who could even kill his own son. However, things are a bit complicated. Yes, Ivan was ambitious, vengeful, brave, and a leader truly feared by his enemies. But his nickname Grozny in Russian does not exactly correspond to terrible, rather than the words terrible or bad, which might carry negative meanings. The nickname Grozny in his native language is closer to meanings like mighty or powerful. And if we evaluate Ivan in the context of our painting, there are differences of opinion regarding whether he killed his son. But in this divide, Repin prefers the narrative of the Russian historian Nikolai Karamzin. Ivan's relationship with his son was not very good from the start, but it worsened significantly after a breaking point. One day, while the son's pregnant wife, Yelena, is sitting in her room, Ivan enters the room unannounced. He thinks Yelena is dressed inappropriately and attacks the woman. Yelena miscarries as a result of this attack. The son, naturally, takes a systematic stance against his father. While the tension between father and son gradually increases, finally, Ivan has a disagreement with his son during a planned attack. Ivan interprets this situation as his son's disloyalty and, as a result of a fit of rage, strikes his son on the temple with his staff. The son collapses to the ground unconscious. Ivan immediately takes his son into his arms, begins to kiss him, and starts shouting, "I'm cursed. I killed my son. I killed my son." Actually, the son did not die at that moment, but he suffered a severe loss of consciousness. At one point, he wakes from this unconsciousness and says this sentence to his devastated father beside him: "I die as a faithful son and a simple servant." The son loses his life shortly after this attack. What makes the event more striking is the detail that the son Ivan killed was from his first wife, Anastasia. For Ivan, who married multiple people throughout his life, his first wife, Anastasia, had a special place, because Anastasia was someone who knew how to calm Ivan and was good for this angry man. After Anastasia died, Ivan fell into a serious void and tried to close this void with circles of pleasure and debauchery. When we take into account Anastasia's value in Ivan's eyes, the fact that he killed the son left to him by the first wife, he still could not forget magnifies the tragedy. I also want to share a very interesting piece of information about the work. The person the painter used as a model for Ivan was a friend of his named Grigory Maisoidov. And Grigory was a father who had a disastrously bad relationship with his son in his private life. Specifically, Grigory had a son named Ivan, but in Grigory's mind, he was someone born as a result of his wife's affair with someone else. Throughout his life, Grigory treated his son harshly, never saw him as his own son, and did not show him love. It was a strange coincidence that someone who had problems with his son in real life modeled for the character of Ivan killing his son. Similarly, Vsevolod Garshin, who modeled for Ivan's son in the painting, was a naive and polite person just like the son in the work. In real life, his eyes were generally tearful and his manner was close to bashful. While Garshin was posing, this delicate side of his is evident in its effect on the work. Now let's return to our painter. Look at Ilya Repin's other works. You won't see that much violence. With this work, it seems as if he has gone outside his style. So why did the painter want to depict such violence? Our artist has three sources of inspiration. The first of these is a tragedy his country experienced. In Russia, a revolutionary organization carries out a bomb attack on the Russian Emperor Alexander II. As a result of the attack, Alexander loses his life, and the organization is executed. Repin was near the scene when both the assassination and the execution took place. He even had the opportunity to watch the execution firsthand. Repin was very affected by these two events, by this example of brutality shown by humanity. His second inspiration is music. When the painter listened to the piece Enter by Rimsky-Korsakov, this piece triggered a terrible sense of horror in him. This music almost haunted the artist. Its enthusiastic and equally dark tone would be a motivation for Repin to complete his work. As the painter's final inspiration, we can mention his European trip. In the exhibitions he visited in Europe, he frequently encountered violent paintings. For Repin, who was not accustomed to the art of violence, these works were extremely striking. Additionally, he was disgusted by the senseless brutality in the bullfights he watched there. Upon all this, he said the following about his own work: "I witnessed a series of horrific events this year. It was normal for me to find a way out through history. I started a new painting with excitement. The subject of the painting is the cruelty in our age." Repin had realized that violence was in human nature. No one could escape it, but as an artist, he felt a responsibility and would use his art against violence. Yes, his art would also contain violence, but ultimately, he would not make a glorification of violence, but a critique of violence. And at that moment, an important name in Russian history came to his mind: Ivan the Terrible. The killer of his son, Repin distilled his life energy to the point of obsession. Because of a subject he was not used to, it was a very challenging process psychologically. There were moments when he cried and went into crises during the production phase. In this process, he described his state of mind as crushed under the horrors of contemporary life. When the work was exhibited, it drew reactions from many authorities. There was too much blood. Ivan's expression resembled a madman. The portrayal of such an important emperor in Russian history as a cruel murderer drew serious reactions from some citizens. This work was the first painting to be banned in the Russian Empire. A very important figure from the Russian Orthodox Church said the following about the work: "The art of these days is astonishing, devoid of the slightest ideal, only naked realism, inclined toward criticism and exposure." But as the years passed, these reactions began to decrease and give way to praise. People understood that this work was the product of a massive intellect. Because violence could best be criticized like this, it had to be disturbing. The person looking at the painting should be disgusted by the desire for violence they harbor within. And Repin's work was the tragedy of violence still. The historical reality of the work is in a questionable position. Perhaps the motivation of the second attacker, the idea that Ivan did not actually kill his son, was correct. And perhaps this work was conveying an event that did not happen in reality. But the special side of the work is not its historical realism anyway, but its emotional realism. The panic this father experiences points to such a human emotion that when I look at this work, the impact left on us by the times we lose control comes to mind. Yes, we did not lose control and become a murderer like Ivan, but we have certainly done things we regret. In such moments, you realize that you cannot take back this mistake you made. This mistake will follow you for a lifetime, and every time you remember it, your hatred toward yourself will rise. These moments are so absurd that at first, they don't even seem real. You say, "Let it be a dream so I can wake up." You cannot accept it. This is exactly the feeling Ivan the Terrible gives us, that sense of devastation that suddenly emerges when we lose control. This painting also shows the contrast of the human being. There is no trace left of the violence or the anger of Ivan, who was driven mad with rage just a few seconds ago. Humans experience violence and emotionality back and forth like a pendulum, interestingly. When I first saw this painting and knew nothing about it, I had brought a very different interpretation. I had likened it to a cannibalistic murder, like Goya's Saturn devouring his son. I even thought that just as Saturn continued to swallow his child in an animalistic way, Ivan was biting the head of the person lying in his lap. I had likened Ivan's eyes, which were about to pop out of their sockets, to the thing furthest from a human, to a zombie. Whereas we are all familiar with these eyes, they are the eyes of the emotions closest to human. Moreover, Ivan is not biting his son's head here. He is kissing his son for the last time. His son, whom he killed with his own hands. Only a single tear flows from his son. Soon, much more of these tears will begin to flow from his father's eyes. But no matter what he does, no matter how much he cries, he will not be able to bring his son back. Because in this painting, blood flows more than tears.